My central fear is this fear that we lose respect for our own humanity. AI becomes this grand overlord in our minds that we can't question, that we can't ever be better than, when that's not true. Creativity and ideation come from people.
Well, Olivia Gambelin, thank you so much for joining us on Speak Bold. Welcome.
Thank you, Sarah. Glad to be here.
Well, we're glad to have you. So let's start at the beginning. Being an ethicist, I don't know if that many kids know that they want to be ethicists before they become them later on. So where did your journey begin?
Well, my journey began swearing that I wouldn't become an ethicist, so that's a good place to start. Basically, in high school, I loved philosophy, anything around ethics, anything around philosophy, but I didn't really see what to do with it. You hear philosophy, you hear the ancient philosophers, but you don't really hear of modern day philosophers or people using philosophy in tech. I grew up in the Silicon Valley, so it's tech. You're always surrounded by tech. We actually had one of the teachers at my high school say to me one day, he goes, Olivia, you should look into tech ethics. And this was way before tech ethics was even...
Like, what year are we talking here?
Oh, gosh.
Not to age you.
Like 2010, something?
2010, okay.
Yeah. All right. So ages before anyone had really even heard of tech ethics, and he had caught on because of the field of medical ethics. It's like, oh, that would be interesting, translating it into technology. I told him, no. What do you mean? Why would I ever be an ethicist? I don't want to do that. And I left. Then, time goes by. Exactly. Never say never. That's what you become. Time went by. I came back to philosophy, took a little, call it a side quest into physics, but came back into philosophy in my studies. And again, ethics, morality, I was just fascinated by. So in my undergrad, I said, fine, I'm going to do ethics, morality, philosophy, and I'll figure out something to do with it.
And was that something that was available at the college that you went to?
It was. So I went to Baylor University. My degree is technically a bachelor's of arts in philosophy. I do have a minor in entrepreneurship, hence the I will find something to do with this. The entrepreneur was kicking in going, I don't know what it is, but I'm going to do it. And I made a promise to myself, I will come back to ethics and morality, this study, when I find something practical to do with it. I'm a very practical person. So graduated, and I said, you know what? I want to move back to Europe. I'd done a study abroad there, and I'm half Italian. So I said, great, I'm going to go overseas, and I'm just going to kind of bounce around, pick up different projects, figure out what I want to do. And through that time, I was doing a lot of digital strategy and communication for either startups or startup adjacent. And I actually ended up in Brussels for the first time working as a data privacy researcher for a small consulting firm that serviced startups. So data privacy is adjacent to data ethics. And this is when that conversation was first starting to become mainstream. I had the cheesy light bulb moment one day in a conference where a woman says, oh, the next big topic is data ethics. I went, oh my God, it's technology, which I'm already working in this sector and I think is fascinating. And then my intellectual love of ethics, they actually meet.
So when you were working in data privacy originally, and you weren't necessarily even thinking of data ethics, what sparked something in your brain to say, okay, this could be something that I could do as a living?
I like to say just pure stubborn will, because when I ran across the topic of data ethics through data privacy, I didn't go home and sit and look at, oh, what's the job prospects? How does an ethicist work? Who are other ethicists? I went home and I said, I need a master's degree in this. This is what I'm going to do. And I think within that week, I applied to 3 different programs that were early stages starting to surface some of these AI ethics classes and courses. So I ended up at the University of Edinburgh doing that. But it really was more of that internal gut feeling of, this is what I'm meant to do, which I know sounds cheesy, but I had that history of ethics, and then seeing it in such a practical setting, it was a kind of a no duh, of course this is it moment for me.
For anybody who is saying, yes, we should all do the right thing, ethics are great, but I don't know how you do that day to day. How do these companies with hundreds, thousands, plus employees. How does everybody come together to have a singular goal like this?
Yeah, which is difficult. And it's a point that a lot of companies are getting stuck on right now. I'm actually writing a book at the moment. It'll be published in the summer of 2024, and it's all around creating a strategy for responsible AI for ethics, because this is such a question where you have companies say, this is important. How the heck do I do this? Mm-hmm. So the book itself breaks down a lot of different facets and a lot of different approaches. But what it comes down to, and what I like to describe to people, actually, right, let me ask you a question, Sarah. How would you define ethics?
I would define ethics as
This isn't a trick question. Don't worry.
No, I know. I'm not ready for this one, but I would say it's a subset of data that is designed to make humans be the best versions of themselves.
Yeah. So the great thing about ethics is we as humans practice ethics on our day-to-day, but it's so subconscious to us. It's so natural that we don't realize that we're engaging in ethical decision-making. So when it comes to actually using ethics in technology, it's surfacing a very natural process. Mm-hmm. So everyone's got their own definition, their own perspective, their own understanding of what ethics is and how it works. Yeah. So a lot of my job when I'm first engaging with a company is actually to get everyone on the same terminology and the same concept of not your own personal ethics, but how to use ethics in the workplace. And so the definition I use is it's a decision analysis tool. We're looking at very critical decisions that we're making around our models, our data, and we're fine-tuning that decision to get the most out of our models and our data, but the most in a way that aligns with what we as humans need, not necessarily
the least amount of bias.
Exactly. Great example.
So, okay, let's talk about companies that you work with.
Yeah.
Do you reach out and say, hey, we think we can help here? Do they come to you? How do you form those partnerships?
I work very word of mouth, mainly because ethics is still a new field. So it takes a while for companies to come to the maturity of we need, say, a strategy or a framework in place. So I'm working with what you would consider very mature in their responsible AI journey companies. That's mainly word of mouth. The other way that people find me is I am a very avid speaker. So as we were discussing before we started, I am constantly flying all over, giving these talks around awareness and practicality. And so what I try and do with these talks is open people's mind up to, wow, okay, this is actually something that we can do and we see the benefit of. And then that usually starts in terms of engagement. I think the other ways I've been doing lately that's been really fun are these executive dinners where it's usually larger enterprise, Fortune 500 style company, a dinner with their executives, usually a mix of AI and innovation and tech executives. And I just lead them through the basics of creating an ethics strategy. Why I say dinner is it makes people relax.
Sure.
You got a glass of wine, you're willing to engage in a subject that usually there might be a little hesitancy, but when it's in an open conversation, you're sharing meals with people, it puts you in a different frame of mind where you're open to this new idea and you're open to this actually isn't scary and I'm not a bad person for not having thought of this before.
Sure. Right.
So those have been fun.
Well, you mentioned, Fortune 500 companies. You're obviously in Silicon Valley quite a bit, yes. Even though you travel a lot. So let's talk about the companies that have been making news over the last couple of years. AI is all anyone can talk about. I moonlight as a tech reporter, and AI is one of those things that half of our audience is like, oh my God, everything's about AI now. Yeah. Don't you guys have anything else to talk about? It's a pretty big deal.
Yeah.
And a lot of companies, big or small, are grappling with that. And I assume that, this is exactly where you come in. So where do you find the pain points? Is a company the size of Google coming to you and saying, we've got an issue with this AI model that we've built. Can you help us make it better? Or is it more, we would like to build an AI model and we want to make it good? Or both?
It's honestly both. And it depends on the company and their approach to AI, actually. So I'll have companies that come to me for that retrospective fix, and they're more being forced into this because of incoming regulation, compliance, or a news story just broke and they're worried that maybe not necessarily a news story on them, but a news story on a company that's similar to them. And they're going, oof, I think we might have missed something.
It's going to be an optics situation.
Exactly. So let's look in reverse and let's try and fix some of this. So that's more of companies that take a very risk-heavy mindset towards AI, towards using any of this tooling, building any of this tooling. The pain point, though, for the companies in the opposite direction, more of that innovation mindset, is the sense of we've built things in the past. We've seen them, they've done well, they've done bad, but you know what? We're missing this human element. We're missing the ability. We haven't quite reached the full potential that we know we can by aligning with these values. It comes from more of an intrinsic motivation internal to these companies, and it's really, really relevant. It's dependent on that company culture, I want to say, and internal drivers.
Sure.
So it's two pain points, which I know is always funny to say. There's not really one main driver, but everyone's coming at this problem from different angles. So it's trying to pick up all those pieces and bring them together into one cohesive story.
Okay, so let's say that, and let's talk about your current company in a second. But you have been, you're coming into a company to make the ethics version of their AI better. Yeah. Right? On the surface. What do? You walk in, you sit down, you sit in with some engineers, we looking at code. Like how does that process start?
Yeah. It actually starts with the people. And this is a common misconception that happens in responsible AI and ethics. I use those terms interchangeably. It's responsible AI is the industry, ethics is the practice within it.
Oh, got it.
I start with the people because, the misconception is to start at the technology. Let's get into the code. Let's get into the data sets. 9 times out of 10, the problems aren't there. They're actually rooted in the people or the process that the people are building through. So instead, I actually bring together the team of the engineers and I have an open discussion with them, which usually takes them a little off guard, and we have to warm them up a little bit to being able to talk and openly share. But most of the time, when you ask someone, hey, what could be the worst case scenario with what you're building, they're going to know. They've just been too afraid to voice it. But if you get them in a room with 20 other of their peers and everyone's saying the same fear, and then they start to say, wait a second, we could actually...
Now, are we talking about like gender bias, racial bias, anything else that's, besides the sort of obvious stuff that everybody's worried about, but don't always know that they're doing wrong?
Yeah, that one's really, really common, especially when you're working with data scientists or engineers. You're always talking about bias. And there's a lot of struggle around bias because it's very difficult to completely eliminate. It's actually impossible to completely eliminate any bias. So you're trying to figure out what's the right trade-offs there. But usually when it comes, let's work with bias. So you are using the ethical value of fairness when you are trying to mitigate bias. In order to be able to mitigate that bias and put in the right safeguards, you need to all have the same definition of fairness. So I can sit down with the engineers and go through the data and say like, all right, this looks a little bit unbalanced, but that's my definition of fairness. Is that actually the definition that the company needs, that the team is using, that the individual I'm sitting next to understands?
Yeah.
Hence why you have to go back to the people and you go, all right, guys, let's define fairness. I can guarantee you if you've got a room full of 20 engineers, you're going to have 20 definitions of fairness that they've all been working with.
I have to assume that you get a lot of pushback. Do you ever get reluctant people in these meetings saying, I don't want to be here?
Yep.
I think I'm doing everything right. I'm not a bad person.
Yes. I get that less and less nowadays, which is great because ethics is becoming such a prevalent conversation. But I definitely get that. And those ones are fun for me because all I do is I have to sit with that person and I go, okay, well, let's think about something in your personal life. Like, do you have kids? Do you have pets? Do you have a partner? Let's talk about the relationship you have with them. And let's pull some example from that morning. Say, every morning you get up and your partner's making breakfast and she's really exhausted. And you think, okay, well, maybe that's not fair that she's always the one making breakfast for the both of us. And so we just connect it into the day-to-day life. I say, well, let's make this personal. Let's bring this down to your perspective and your point of view. And I get them at that level and they say, okay, I see why this is important on my personal level. And then I draw the parallels to, well, this is what you're programming for other people on their personal levels. And by making that connection, it becomes, oh, I see why this is important. And then I add in the practical sides of, well, here are the points in time in your workflow that you need to be checking this decision or testing against this metric to ensure that the person that you're coding for is having a good and fair experience. I know this is a bit of a rocky example here, but here's where in your workflow you actually have practical steps to ensure this.
Yep.
And then I have the buy-in because they go, okay, I see why this is important as a human. And I see that this is actually practical. It's not just an abstract, theoretical conversation.
Okay, so being the globe traveler that you are and working with companies around the world, and obviously we're a company, where the founders came from, where the company has flourished the most, can sometimes drive ethical policy.
Yeah.
What do you do with a company who may have an ethical policy that you don't agree with?
Yeah, so it's a great question. And something that I have to do as an ethicist is actually not detach myself, but distance myself from my own moral code, my personal moral code, so that I understand how. A lot of practice.
Okay.
A lot of practice, a lot of analyzing. So for example, I'll tell people I am naturally a virtue ethicist. So there are different fields of ethical thought. I tend towards one called virtue ethics, but I know that that's how I think. So when I'm working with a client,
You're confident.
exactly.
You know what you're talking about.
And I know how the other mindsets work. I now know how to identify them. So I can tell when there's a disagreement because we're working on different, let's say, ethical values or definitions or mindsets. And I know where I'm coming from. So then I seek first to actually understand, well, why do you have this policy or why is this in place? And usually once we dig down into it, it's, well, we actually agree at the base, but either something's gone haywire in the actual execution of it, or it really is reflective of, say, the company culture or that country cultural, that culture that I might not necessarily be familiar with. So then it's more of a question of, okay, I don't agree with this because I don't personally believe it, or because there are bigger issues and that this is actually something that needs to be fixed. That's really the question that I have to get down into. And then from there, if it's something that I don't agree with, cool, I'll give them my opinion if it's asked for or if it's needed, or if I feel that it's necessary, I'll give them my opinion, but I'll stress that this is my opinion and I'll tell them why. Or if it's something that needs to be fixed, then it's, well, let's sit down and let me show you why it needs to be fixed. Like this is the risk that you're setting yourself up for with this, we'll call it an error or logical error. We need to fix it.
Do you ever come across situations where the ethics, it's not necessarily that they're not listening to you, it's that you do not agree with where it's going? And if so, then what happens?
Yeah, and great question. So for me personally, I do have a couple of just not red lines in terms of I disagree, but more of I cannot detach myself from my emotions in that situation. And those ones I don't take.
And how do you, and like, how early do you feel that? How do you know that it's going to be one of those things?
It's pretty early on. I can hear it right away. So one of the things actually that's a tool of an ethicist is something called moral intuition. And I try and teach people this. It's really, really cool. It's that gut feeling where you're like, that feels off.
Yep.
that is you as a person. You think of yourself as like a model, and you've had all this data of different moral scenarios and different decisions you've made over the years. And that is your like little nudge in your belly going, don't like that. I'm very in tune with that because it helps me be able to find risk spots for clients, but then it also helps me understand where am I going to struggle in terms of having a difference in values or a difference in understanding. For example, I don't tend to work very closely. I have worked in health tech quite a lot, but there are certain healthcare kind of solutions that, for example, one of my best friends is a type 1 diabetic. I have a very hard time working on anything that's tracking biometrics, using the kind of same technology that type 1 diabetics use to stay alive.
Is it data privacy that concerns you?
No, it's more of I have seen the perspective of my best friend run out of her supplies because a tech startup has overtaken the supply chain for that.
I think another one.
Exactly. And so I know personally that I wouldn't be able to work on that because I have such an emotional reaction because of my personal emotions for my friend. So I have a few ones like that it's not because I disagree, it's because I need to be able to have that distance to be able to help work through those values.
Yeah.
Another point with that too is one of the things that I do as an ethicist is help form those value sets, making sure, especially with companies, that it's not one person like the CEO's values that we're working on.
Right.
I have a triangulation method essentially where we're pulling from international policies. So say the company's based in the US or say it's based in Brussels, we're pulling on policies and the values that are in those policies. The EU has the AI Act that's got a whole list of I believe it's 7 different ethical values. I might be off on the number there, that we use as that's one point of information. Then we pull on what are industry standards. So if it's healthcare, we're pulling the Hippocratic Oath, we're pulling medical ethics. And then we pull the values of the company, not the individual, but of the company and then the company culture. And we triangulate between those 3 to see, okay, what's our value set that we're working with and what's the prioritization. So there is an objective aspect to these values that if we're able to get there, and again, it's a place of no judgment, the people I'm working with have to also be open for that conversation. If you have one person that's like, it's my values or the highway, there's no way to work together. But if you're open to those conversations, then it's very easy to say, okay, we've made an objective value set that we can now work with.
Right. Yeah. It's sort of a fundamental thing. And I think, so this is what you do. You're used to doing this. Tell us, I think, the ethics conversation between graduate, post-grad, and now has been an interesting journey. You've met a lot of people.
Oh my gosh.
Learned a lot of things.
Not a lot of names. I forget those.
Yeah, well, you and me both. But tell us what is your day-to-day these days? Where do you work? What do you do?
So I have to say it's been a bit of a shift lately. So I'm the founder of a company called Ethical Intelligence. And for 4 years, EI, we call it EI for short, was a consultancy. And it was a beautiful learning experience for me. That's actually, those 4+ years of experience are now what I'm writing this book on. But in the past few months, I felt this draw of both me personally as an AI ethicist needing to come out from behind the scenes of the company. Mm-hmm. But then also there was a different need driving the company. So we went through from outside probably looks like a pivot, but we've been calling it a rebalance because we were growing this consultancy. Meanwhile, we had this amazing community growing alongside us the entire time. We actually have an expert network of verified responsible AI practitioners. We're just shy of 100 now of them. And they would work with us on these consulting projects, global network. But that community was growing organically this entire time.
Yeah, I was going to say, how did you recruit a bunch of people? Word of mouth?
Word of mouth. really wish I knew do more about how to track that, because I would sit down and I'd ask
The ethics people just can smell each other like, let's work.
well, there's this craving for community for people like me. We don't really have a space. We're pretty spread out. There are people being hired into these positions. There's a lot of independent consultants. There's a lot of academics. But there's no place where we can actually come together and exchange information to be able to better our own selves, our own practices, but also better the industry. So ethical intelligence we've gone through a rebalancing where we've put the consulting more on the back burner. We still have recurring clients. We still offer our services. It's all word of mouth now. And instead we're actually focusing on that community and essentially creating, think of it like a trade association for responsible AI practitioners, making a place for people like myself to actually have a community and have the resources that we need to be able to fully grow this industry. So to answer your question, half of my day I'm spending on that build of that community. So I am speaking with people in the network. We're organizing meetups. We have a whole central hub system that we keep different papers on. We keep different frameworks. I work a lot with companies that are bringing in their software to train our community on, so that there's that tooling available. So half my day is spent on what do people like me need and talking with them.
Sure.
And it's such a joy to be able to have that side of the community. The other half of my day, I'm writing a book right now, and I do a lot of public speaking, and that's more focused on my own thinking. Like I mentioned, I tend towards this more design approach to ethics and AI. And so lately I've really been pushing where that thought process will go. I have this concept of in pursuit of good tech, where that's got roots in actually ancient philosophy. But I've been pushing that thinking on my day-to-day. I mean, I'll start a newsletter soon for it, and grow what I want to be as this community of, it's not anti-tech, it's tech with a new mindset.
Sure.
Right. It's a busy day.
So when, it sounds like in general, your life is very optimistic. Writing a book on how to make ethics better, helping companies, creating a community. Are there things about ethics in AI specifically that frighten you?
Yes. Yeah. I could definitely go through specifics about different practices, different standards, different specific solutions or products out there that scare me. But I can really summarize it all into one central fear. And it's not a fear that you'll usually hear from an ethicist. My central fear is this fear that we lose respect for our own humanity. And what I mean by that is we seem to be, with these new developments in AI, assigning, wow, it's super intelligent, or it's so much better than us at doing our own job. And it's like, I'm questioning my own, even with Google Maps, like I question, if I put into Google Maps, should I go in that direction? Should I follow those directions? When really I know the shortcuts because I've lived in the city for so long.
Yeah, just did that earlier today.
Oh yeah, I was doing it as well. It's completely.
Yeah, I was like, I don't want to go down Jones.
Yeah,
that's a stupid way.
That's a terrible way. But the AI told me to, so maybe you start questioning.
Yeah, like who's smarter?
Exactly. So my fear is that we lose that respect that, the data and the models that have been built, that data is just a reflection of us as people.
Because we made the data.
We made the data. And the only reason that we cannot, let's say, have the same insights as some of these models is because we don't have the mental computation to work through millions of data points. It's not that we can't. If we had the ability to mentally compute that mass amount of data, we would be able to find those patterns and those insights.
We wouldn't need artificial intelligence.
Exactly.
We would be fine.
Yeah.
But we do.
But we do, which is great because it's amazing because we're able to find these patterns that we are, I don't like the term blind here, but it's kind of like that we're blind to just because of the scale. But it doesn't mean that we're incapable of finding those solutions on our own. We've just shortcutted by having these great models. But those models as well, they focus on patterns that we as people have. Like it's a reflection of us.
Right.
And so my fear is that we lose that respect and we forget that aspect, that AI becomes this grand overlord in our minds that we can't question, that we can't ever be better than, when that's not true. Creativity and ideation come from people.
Yeah.
It's the only place that
it's like now's the time to make sure that we don't keep some of that antiquated stuff going.
Exactly.
Built within machines that we as humans just didn't know any better about building differently.
Yeah. And with that, it's wrapped up in the fear too that we as humans, we have so many different types of intelligences, not just this logic-based one that AI has been built off of. We have emotional intelligence. We have, it's not the name of my company, but we have ethical intelligence, different from the company name. We have different inputs that we have not either found a way to be able to codify so that we can build models off of, or in some case, I honestly think are impossible to codify in the way that we've currently built our technology, and that's fine. There's nothing wrong with that. Having emotions as a person, being tuned into those emotions are incredibly important to understand how we make our decisions, and really will tune us into different patterns that isn't going to be picked up in a technological solution. And that's fine. That's a good thing. That's just having the respect that we are not, I don't want to say like we are equals to AI because it makes AI sound like a humanoid, but we have value and we have different things that make us human and that we can find this benefit and impact from, that's separate from AI. And my fear, to come back on, is that we lose sight of that, and we lose sight of the respect for that. And that, I think, is just really going to throw an imbalance into our society and into how we function and interact with each other, when there's something just so beautiful about being human, and we can have that exist alongside AI, and we can actually have our AI and our solutions help us be more human. So a little bit of a different fear. Normally people would say stuff about different risks and worst case scenarios. Mine is more just respect for being human.
I think, there are a lot of people who say, well, technology, I mean, I don't work there. I guess we're just going to be given the tools that we're given, and we hope that all those smart people do the right thing.
Yeah.
And that is an extremely a simplified way to put it. Do you ever come across situations where someone might say, for example, is it ethical to eat meat? Is it better to not? You've got health stuff. You have lots of, generations of people who might feel a certain way or have been taught a certain thing, and it's not going to be easy to change someone's mind. And do you even want to?
Yeah. I laughed a little bit there because as an ethicist, you get some bizarre questions. And my friends and I have been slowly creating the scale on a scale from 0 to like online sports betting. How related is this to my field of expertise? Because I'll get like really random ones out on some bizarre thought pattern where someone's like, is it ethical to jaywalk? I'm like, I don't know. I mean, I jaywalk, but this has nothing to do with my field.
I was busy.
Yeah, exactly. I was like, so there are questions like that, but then you have questions too that actually will be translated into the technology. That's where my expertise comes in. And, in some cases, you have to respect that other people are going to have different perspectives, and that's okay. As long as it's not causing significant harm in its application, right? It's okay to have different opinions and different value sets. That's just part of being human, and we're working together on those. And most of our values and the values that we hold as individuals, if you really trace it down to the root, we're always pointing towards the kind of same values. It's just the execution that's different.
Yeah.
And if we can have that understanding, then it's okay to have the different executions at the end of the day.
Right. As long as no one's being unreasonable for no good reason that can be backed up.
Exactly. Exactly. But then you can have the objectives. You can usually pull in a lot of data that and going, yeah, that's not working. Or like, your customers aren't really liking that. Let's shift that back.
What advice would you give to somebody who dismisses what you do for a living? Who might say, I get it, you're smart. Thank you for the advice, but it's not relevant to me.
Yeah. I like that question a lot. And I'm going to pull a little bit on my ancient Greek philosophers because I haven't done that enough yet in this interview. The practice of ethics, if you've ever heard of the term in pursuit of the good life, the practice of ethics is based in the pursuit of the good life. What that means is we as people on our day-to-day, we're making decisions that are either leading us in the direction of what is a good life for us or leading us further away from that. So when you make a decision that aligns with who you are as a person, what your purpose is, how you find fulfillment, where your values are laid, you're taking steps towards that good life, right?
And you kind of know there's a fork in the road. You know which way you want to go.
Exactly. And if you don't, then you need some self-reflection. But most people do. I would say I haven't run across a person yet that's gone, I don't understand that. It's just something ingrained in us. I want to fulfill my purpose. Well, that's your good life, your purpose-filled life. Ethics is the tool that you're using when you're making those decisions. You're saying, is this going to lead me towards my good life, or is it going to lead me in the opposite direction?
Right.
That's what you're doing. That's why that's hence the decision analysis aspect of ethics. We have the opportunity in time right now in technology to, I'm not going to say hijack that system, but actually be able to utilize the development of our technology to help us move in that direction of a good life. So what I like to tell people is, we're sitting in the middle of the Silicon Valley. 20 years ago, we changed the world, right? Probably even further, 20, 30 years ago, we started to change the world. And then today we looked up and we're like, we don't actually like how we changed it that much. We've got a lot of problems. We got a lot of fear, a lot of risk. It doesn't have to be that way. It really doesn't have to be that way. We are still in control. If we actually look at how we're building our technology and we say, is this solution, is this product going to help me in the direction of reaching that good life, or push me in the wrong direction, or block me? How can I change that so that technology, it's in pursuit of good tech?
Yeah.
Technology that helps us in that good life direction and that struggle towards good life. So for someone that is skeptical of this, I would challenge them and I would say, well, you want to have that good life, right? Yeah. Why not? Why not go for it? What would the world look like if we actually designed technology in pursuit of good tech in a way that aligned with our values, that brought us closer to that good life? What would that world look like? And are you brave enough to find out what it's going to look like? Because we're headed in that direction. Are you going to be a part of that? Or are you going to be on the other end trying to pull us back?
Wise words. Good advice. Yeah, I like that. Good life forward.
Yes.
Who's going to say no to that?
Yeah.
What do you do for fun when you do have downtime?
I am a huge outdoors person, so I backpack all the time. I am an avid climber. Anything to get me away from a computer screen is usually what I tend towards. And I'm a classically trained ballet dancer. I've been dancing since I was 4.
Wow.
So that one I think is one of my biggest joys, but the hardest one to keep up with all of the travel, solely because you have to be in a place to be able to do that.
Sure. Yeah.
Having to keep good studios. But I found good studios and I pop in and out. And it's a lot of... I also love to cook. I'm thinking of all the things I love to do. Anything that I'm not on tech, that I'm not using technology for, because I feel like
it's like brain needs different
different input.
Put brain in the kitchen.
I joke that 5-10 years from now I'm going to sell a company and I will have a second career as a carpenter. I don't know why. I've never done carpentry before, but I have this desire to build furniture, which sounds bizarre.
It doesn't. I just think it's something that most people say, oh, I'll never have time or I don't have the skills to do. But I mean, what's stopping you?
Like, I just want to build things with my hands after this.
Maybe a ballet studio. There you go.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Something with my hands. I'm doing everything with my brain and on a keyboard right now. And now after that, I want to do something physical with my hands. So,
Well, Olivia, this has been a real pleasure. We really thank you for having been taking however much of your time. I know you're very busy, so thank you again for being with us on Speak Bold.
thank you so much, Sarah. I really enjoyed it.